Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Smart Tech webinar brought to you by EdGate. We're super excited that we have such a fantastic group of panelists today, and it looks like we have a fantastic attendance as well. So welcome to what we think is going to be an exciting conversation. Just so everybody is aware, we will be recording the webinar. It will be available afterwards on YouTube, and we will send it out to anybody who did register. So you will get the link to the webinar, and you can share it with your friends and family and your kids. I'm sure they'll all want to watch. So the topic is around how state and district leaders are separating wheat from chaff. So what we did today is we have some leaders from both EdTech and from education, people that are kind of in the weeds on the approval process, and of course, people who are trying to get their products in the door. We think that this group will be able to shed some light on what's happening in this space and how you can find adoption and make sure that your product is ready for the classroom. So I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll dig into the topic a little bit further. So I want to start with Mark Maslowski. Mark, if you could give us a quick intro, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mark Maslowski. I'm the VLA director at Jefferson County Educational Service Center. We're located in Steubenville, Ohio. We're a small ESC that supports 7 local schools in Ohio, and then we provide about over 100 schools with our online curriculum platform in Ohio as well. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm anxious to learn some things myself as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the intro. Sarah, could you give us an intro?
Of course. I'm Sarah Delano Moore. I'm a math educator and writer, and my work for about the last 20 years has been in educational publishing, where I currently serve as Vice President for Content and Research at Origo Education. So I think a lot about the math world, especially for elementary children right now.
Excellent. And David Berg.
Hi there. I am a high school teacher by trade and training from California. I live in the Pacific Northwest now. I work for an organization called Big Picture Learning, which is a nonprofit. In that capacity, I was the co-creator of a platform called Emblaze, an EdTech product that we have out on the market now that helps schools and systems manage their internship and apprenticeship programs. I'm happy to talk more about that later, but glad to be here.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. And finally, we have Dr. Michael Rubin.
Howdy, everybody. Mike Rubin, principal at Uxbridge High School, Uxbridge, Massachusetts. I've been principal here for 9, now going on 10 years. Was named the 2020 Massachusetts Principal of the Year, and our school really has leveraged its focus around post-secondary readiness. We work very closely with a number of different opportunities in the EdTech space in terms of student certification and career pathway work. So looking forward to the conversation and learning with and for all of you today.
Excellent. You know, we're impressed with the work being done by Dr. Rubin and by our panel. There's a lot of good information here. So with many EdTech companies claiming the benefit of their smart products, how do districts and states separate the innovation wheat from the chaff? We want to know if outcomes on state assessment testing matter, what other key factors play a role, and why. Today, these experts that we presented will provide the community with some insights to help unravel these mysteries of adoption and hear what new technologies are resonating and which ones are white noise. As I've mentioned before, this webinar is part of a series of conversation EdGate is hosting surrounding the topics of educational effectiveness today and what it takes to get there. I mentioned before, this is being recorded, and you will be received the link to the recording after the webinar. let's get started. And I'm going to kick it off with a question to Dr. Moore. You sent me an article recently from the Washington Post that attempts to shed light on the value of AI and its role in society. Title was, is an AI chatbot smarter than a 4-year-old? And we will provide a link to this article in the follow-up material to everybody. Can you, the discussion here is not all about AI, but we want to kind of cover it because it is the elephant in the EdTech room these days. Everybody's talking AI, so we want to start there. Sarah, can you give us some insight on the article and your impression as it relates to the EdTech community?
Of course, Rich, thank you. When I read the article, I was struck by a line very close to the end that talks about the fact that growing up, as children do, is different from scaling up as technology does. And I work primarily in the elementary education space, preschool through maybe grade 6. I was a middle school teacher when I was in the classroom. So I think a lot about these technologies and how they impact and change the learning young children need to do. My teachers told me you have to learn long division because you might not always have a calculator. That's not true anymore. So that part has changed. When we look at AI, which is definitely the squirrel, the shiny object in our space right now, to me, that article reminded me that it's one dimension of EdTech. And like any dimension of EdTech, it has its strengths and it has its limitations. If we're looking for factual information fairly quickly, we can often get that from AI. We still need to check, but it's getting better and better in those ways. If we're looking at strategic reasoning, at the kinds of causal relationships that young children figure out through play, AI doesn't know how to do that yet. Or at least our large language model chatbots don't know how to do that yet. And so we need to be thinking about what's our purpose? What is it, for my role as an elementary mathematics publisher, what is it we want children to learn? How do we want that to happen? Where does the tech fit? And I thought this article was a really nice reminder that it has a place, but even though it's the new shiny object, it's not everything. We've got a lot of other interesting technology to talk about together today.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to latch onto a word because you mentioned play as a key component of what AI cannot do. And when we talk about play, there's a lot of movement towards the gamification of content and gaming in education. So I want to explore that a little bit with Mark, because I think you have some background there on with the VLA leveraging gaming technology. Can you tell us what impact it's had and how you're using it?
Yeah, and I like just to respond to like what Dr. Moore said. The AI is a tool, right? It's like we went from chalkboard, right, to whiteboards. So you still need that human element, right? You still need to teach kids and come up with strategies how to use those tools. So I don't think it's no AI or yes AI, but I think Dr. Moore is right, is how you're going to implement that. And what we see with our gaming courses, which is really important because we saw that, okay, we need to provide some social emotional learning standards for our students. And primarily our students, we're a nonprofit, we're public, but we provide curriculum for a lot of schools. How can we make something engaged for students to learn what appropriate behavior is, how to handle frustration? Well, we saw that there was something called game plan, and we were able to work with a new employee who just graduated from our local university to create a course called Gaming Concepts. And in that course, we're able to sneak things in about teamwork, working with somebody, how do you handle things when things get frustrated, in a way where students can relate to, because they understand these games. Now, when I looked at those games the first time, I'm thinking, where's Pac-Man? Where's Donkey Kong? I had no idea about what those games look like. But it gives a way for students to be more engaged. And our philosophy, any team member at Jefferson County Education Services Center, students are our first concern. So we need to make sure that we have the engagement piece, and game plan does that for us. We talk to our students, we talk to our teachers what they need, and we have a really good local superintendents that help us and let us know what they need. And they saw, what can we do to teach some of these social emotional learning standards, these standards where kids could learn some of this, but they might not be comfortable in a group environment. How can we do this in a one-on-one environment? And it's really helped us along the way.
Well, that's terrific, Mark. Thank you for that insight into what gaming technologies you're using, what's going on, why you're using it. It's an important facet to what's going on here in the smart tech space. Dr. Rubin, during our pre-recorded interview, we spoke at length about operational efficiencies, and I think we can tie gaming in here a little bit, because I think it's important to figure out, what those operational efficiency is. Can you dig into what you mean by that and give us some examples of what you consider an operational efficiency and how technology plays a role?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this will be a good segue to some of what you'll talk about with my colleague David Berg in a couple of minutes. And the connection to what you've already heard from Mark and Sarah. To me, operational efficiency and really any technological tool that we seek to implement, a term we often use here is the juice going to be worth the squeeze? And I share that in that it's about pragmatism to us, and it's about making sure that the tool that we are using suits the purpose and the why. And I think that is where we do merge some more traditional technology implementation, both hardware and software, to also the thoughts of artificial intelligence. It's really nice to have an AI tool that can help you develop a rubric, but it shouldn't be necessarily being the only tool that you use in developing the rubric. And I was working with our staff recently, and I don't mean to say it in pejorative terms, but sometimes it's garbage in, garbage out. If you want to make sure the tech tool that you're using is going to be hitting the right purpose, for us, we talk about operational efficiency is this going to benefit us in a positive way in the classroom, out of the classroom, for the purpose that we serve? And we looked long and hard at a number of different things, particularly where we have a lot of our students who aren't in the building, going out and participating in things like internships. We really wanted to make sure that the tool that we were using was going to support the actual purpose of the work and make it more efficient. Otherwise, it's just not worth the training and the implementation time. So that is also something I think that you'll hear from a lot of us, and it's probably a good segue to where David and I work together.
Okay, thank you. And I want to remind everybody, there is a Q&A in the bottom of your screen. If you have a question for any of our panelists or for myself, you can put it there. We already do have one question, so thank you, Joyce. We will get to that towards the end of the session, and we'll go through your participation is really important here. So if you're attending and you're listening along, you have a question, please put it in here, and we'll attempt to answer everything. And if we don't get to it on the live event, we'll send out answers afterwards with the material that we provide. So David, Dr. Rubin was pointing towards you and the work that you do, so we want to hear a little bit about that. And I'm going to preface that with the phrase "tools matter," because you said that to me, and I think that's an important part of what Michael was just talking about. Can you dig in there a little bit?
Yeah. The analogy or the metaphor that I use is if the only tool that you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And so tools do matter, particularly around innovative practice. In our case, I'm an educator, and I spend a lot of time in the EdTech space with accelerators and with other startups. Oftentimes those people, not always, but oftentimes those people aren't former educators. They're all former students. But what kind of students were they? Like, what types of school experience did they have? Many times they're quite successful in navigating traditional systems. So they may build something that sort of reaffirms that, which may not be what we need today for kids today. In the case of our platform, as Dr. Rubin mentioned, we work with high schools primarily, and we're promoting an innovative practice, which is that schools are a really powerful place to get knowledge capital, to learn stuff. But so because of the internet, because of the fact that kids are digital natives, like they can get knowledge lots of places now. And so there's a new role for schools, particularly high schools, to play in the lives of young people. And we think it's also to build social capital. It's to help connect them with people out in their communities. In this work, talking about the wheat, separating the wheat from the chaff, we have to look at the tools that are out there, like our tool, we think, and see how essential they are. Are they essential to the work? And when I say essential to the work, we also have to parse that a bit. And Mark probably sees this part, which is companies will come in and talk to district administrators and say, we've got the perfect tool to make your life better, or to provide data for the state, or things like that. If those tools don't make educators' lives better, you're going to spend $100,000 on something that is going to be essentially wasted. And so, and Mark, please challenge me on that. But my sense is that if the tool is essential for making the life of the educator better, and also enabling the educator to feel like they're an innovator because they want to innovate, they want to do different work and improve their practice. If the tool helps with that, it will be successful. We see that a lot in our practice, and I think Dr. Rubin speaks to this. Is like, we want to make it so that educators feel empowered to help build real-world learning experiences for young people. We also want to make it so that that kids are getting to their internships. That they're getting back from their internships. Once principals in particular see our platform and the attendance functionality there, they kind of can't unsee that. Like, oh, I could see that kids are attending their internships. I need to know that. Like, there's certain legal and moral responsibilities to know that. So yeah, that's what we think. We think that it has to be essential for educators.
David, I totally agree with what you said. You have to have buy-in, and it has to be attainable, right? Educators and teachers, I have a family. I have a twin brother who's an educator. His wife's a teacher. My wife's a teacher. I got a couple of daughters. So we know, right? When we go in and we're talking to a group of districts, we do not want to overwhelm the teacher, because the students will see that their teacher might be overwhelmed using a new product, right? Or a new vendor of some sort. So you want to make sure it is attainable. And then when kids use it, you want them to have success in it as well. So yeah, you are totally right there, David. I totally agree with you.
I want to interweave a question that came up on the Q&A here, because I think it's important as you're talking about essential for educators. And I'm curious how you guys kind of parse this. Can you address thoughts on providing free pilots to schools or to educators as a way in which to get into the door? Does that make a difference? How is that viewed by you guys as educators?
Mark, what I think is, which is that we do pilots for schools, but we also do some pilots of our support system, right? So we have like game plan. We piloted that before we started using it, right? We tested that out among our staff, among our young employees, among students. So it takes time to evaluate a product or a vendor. As well, we pilot constantly. So we're working with the Dropout Recovery School right now, and we're creating 6. We did a survey with them, so we're creating 6 career cluster courses for them. That's going to be quarter credit, and we're also providing a pathway to the future for seniors that could graduate, but they still want to participate in fine arts or music or athletics. So we're creating a pathway to the future where we're going to incorporate finance, career readiness skills, internships as well, and job placement. So, I think that school is a great support of us and working together with that. But you have to have a great team, and we're lucky enough to have a team.
I
Thank you,
can
Mark.
chime in, Rich, from a publisher's perspective. Origo's a publisher of elementary math curricula. So when a school adopts a new curriculum, it's a big investment. It's proportionately a lot of money. It's a program they're going to use typically for 5 to 7 years. And making something, what David said really resonated with me, making something that is usable, not just in terms of bells and whistles and reports for administrators, but in the day-to-day lives of teachers and students, is critical. And we certainly believe, and my colleagues in other parts of the math industry, I think, share that belief that pilots are important. I will say that I'm hearing more and more about schools who are saying, we want to pilot, but we don't want to talk with you while we pilot. That makes me very uncomfortable because you're learning about a program in a pilot.
Yeah.
And you need to communicate with us to answer questions, to understand what's going on. We don't need to look over your shoulder every day, but we want to check in on a regular basis to see what's working, what's not. Is what's not working because you didn't find that feature or element of the program yet? Or is it not working because there's something that's really critical to you that we don't have, in which case we might not be the right program, hence the power of a pilot. But we really do. I think pilots, especially with technology, are important because it's so easy to have a veneer of beautiful bells and whistles that don't translate to the day-to-day lives of teachers.
Yeah, it's vaporware. I mean, they is the notion like, ed tech companies. Well, I'm unique. The company I work for is unique in that it's a nonprofit. Ed tech companies are traditionally for-profit entities, which means they have VC funding. They have a whole funding model that really pushes them to get a quick rate of return. And so they are forced, and though they don't like this, but they're forced to invest in marketing. They're forced to invest in saying their platform is everything for all people with a really slick website and lots of customer testimonials and all of this stuff. And they may not at all do what they say. Some of that stuff might be in their roadmap. So piloting is I love that. I think Dr. Moore is right. Like I think pilots are great. I will say though, if you are thinking about adopting a platform and you're a teacher, let's say, adopting a tech tool, let's say, and you're a teacher, if you are tech savvy, you're going to figure it out. Like you're going to, and you're motivated and you want to do it, like you're going to figure it out, whether it's a pilot or not, you're going to figure it out. If you are not into this initiative, if you're just like, this isn't really for me, I'm thinking about my work, like getting kids out into the real world. If an educator's like, yeah, I don't really care. That's not my job. I'm not really interested in that innovation. It doesn't mean they're not amazing educators, but it's just not their area. In that case, you really need leadership. like there needs to be the principal or superintendent, but particularly principals need to say, this is an initiative we're committed to. We're doing this change, whatever this is, change management. We're doing this change. And this is what we're going to say no to because, there's only limited capacity. So here are the things we're not going to do anymore. Here are the things we're going to shed. And that principals have a hard time doing that oftentimes, like saying what they're not going to do if they're going to try something new. But that's a key first step for there to be that change management. Pilots are great along that way, but better if the principal's already said, we're doing this and we're not going to do this stuff anymore, but we're going to do this. So get on board.
So you're saying
I would add to that an encouragement to ask your partner, whoever's materials you're adopting, piloting, whatever it might be, what implementation support they have for those principals, for those administrators who might not be expert in the specifics, but we need them as cheerleaders. How do they know what to look for in a classroom walkthrough? How do they know what questions to ask where others might have gotten stuck and how to overcome those things? That's a place we've invested a lot of energy in the last few years, and it's really been helpful for our school partners because they have that architecture in place to function more independently.
So does that resonate with you, Michael, in terms of the approach to free pilots?
It does and it doesn't. And I think I might be the skunk at the proverbial lawn party right now, but I am going to tell you that I am always very cautious about the implementation of pilots and how we go about it, because oftentimes I want to make sure that the initial levels of support that occur when we're going towards implementation are not just a flash in the pan moment that dissipate after implementation. And I think the other part of it is, it goes back to your earlier question about operational efficiency, is the why. I think as a school leader, it is incredibly, incredibly important for us to indicate the why. There has to be a clear purpose. And I think a lot of teachers, and I put my teacher hat on a little bit, it's been a long time since I was in the classroom, but teachers sometimes feel a little bit snake bitten by the concept of initiative of the day. And so when sometimes they hear the word pilot, they hear, okay, we're going to do this for 30 days. And if somebody doesn't like it enough, we'll just move on to something else. So there needs to be a sustained commitment as well. And I think that is one of the things that one has to be really honest about with a pilot, to be honest, because a pilot is just that. You don't want to give this false pretense that a pilot is the implementation. Those are two very different things. And sometimes people don't divest that. And oftentimes the pilot can determine how or if an implementation is successful, and then in fact whether it can be sustained. So I see the purpose, I value the purpose, but I'm very clear with folks that when we talk about something being a pilot, that the two-way feedback highway needs to be traversed pretty consistently.
Thank you very much for that. It's good to have the viewpoints that we have, because you can provide a different perspective, right? And that's what we want. It's not just about agreement, but it's about digging in and really finding those pathways. And I have to say, as someone who was an EdTech provider with my platform and trying to get pilots in the door, that was really informative in understanding. So my next question would be, does the length of the pilot really make a difference? If we say we'll make it a 2-year pilot, so it does have time to resonate and it has time does that make a difference to you, Michael, and to the community, or what have you guys seen?
Highly variable. There is no one answer to that. I have seen things where a pilot of anything has been so successful so quickly that people can't wait to see how it's going to be sustained over time. I've also seen others where the implementation curve is this rocket forward and then the dip. And people struggle with the dip because they expected everything to be stratospheric for the and that's not sustainable, right? It's not there. If you're doing something right, there needs to be some sort of challenging conversation that occurs within it. So I do see that it's a possibility, but I also think it's important for anybody when they enter into the conversation about implementation to have an honest and frank conversation about what in fact the short and long-term expectations are, again, on both sides of that relationship. And I think the final piece of it, for us at least, and I think this is considering evolution, right? How something is used in year one. I'm going to go to something that's not particularly technological. As an English teacher, I taught in the English classroom. The only book I think I consistently taught for 5 years was The Great Gatsby. Taught it every single year that I taught, but I can't say I used it the same way year over year.
Correct.
Technology is the same thing.
Yep.
For those of us who are video gamers, I've beaten Mario 3 a bunch of times, but I've never beaten it the same way. And I think that is an important metaphor for technological implementation and pilots.
So I see people shaking their heads, and I have another series of questions. We could go on this thread for, I'm sure, another hour easy, but 30 seconds from each of you. Did you have another comment, Sarah, on that thread? You're muted.
Forgive me. I want to echo the importance of implementation. You know, when we talk to new customers, we talk about it's going to take 2 to 3 years to be in a place where you have a system in place, you have a team, and it's those open expectations and two-way street that really matters.
Mark?
No, I think it's important, like, and I can't remember who said it, maybe everybody in the panel, the support system has to be there. I guess in the business world, they call it customer service. So when we pilot with somebody or somebody pilots with us, it's important that we meet on a weekly basis at the beginning and then a bi-weekly, but there's communication there. So they get to know you and your personality a little bit and know what you can do and what you can't do. I think that's unbelievable important. The situation being sometimes being a nonprofit because we're not huge. So once they see that we could do things, people have to be ready. They'll ask for more, which is fine. But I agree. I think the support system has to be there, and you have to be communicating throughout the pilot because it's not going to benefit you or the school.
Okay, David?
I'll just add, and this is something that Dr. Rubin mentioned or referenced. A pilot is like, it's like dating. It's like, wait, you know, it might not be right for one or the other. Like, I will just say, as an EdTech company, like, I have said to customers, you know, you're not really ready for this. Like, you're not ready for this innovation. You don't have the capacity, the leadership. It's okay, but come back to us when you are. Like, and you know, like Mike said, like, there's a capacity thing. Like, you gotta, like, there's work to do. Most initiatives and most EdTech products and most of this work, somebody still has to do work. Like, and if you don't have the capacity, you're not ready. It's okay, but you're not ready.
Thank you. No, those are great points. So let's keep moving forward. And thank you for the question, Joyce. That was really informative and helpful. So this is going back to Sarah, and I want to talk about crosswalking a little bit and understand a little bit what is crosswalking or mapping, and can you explain how it can be employed to gain access to new markets?
Sure. When we think about elementary school math, it's fairly easy for all of us to come up with a common list of what do students need to learn. They need to learn addition and subtraction facts, and then how to add and subtract all different flavors of numbers. Same with multiplication and division, some geometry. The way standards are constructed in the United States, because they are state by state, because we missed on the power of the common part of the Common Core, it's a challenge as a publisher to keep track of, okay, this state is multiplying up to 10 in third grade, and then they just go on to everything. This state adds a standard in fourth grade about it going up to 12. And so the idea of mapping and crosswalking is connecting lessons to standards. And then, and this has been the magic of our partnership with EdGate on this front, being able to say, if I wrote this lesson for this standard in Ohio, where I live, about multiplication in third grade, the technology can help connect that to that related third grade standard, which might have slightly different phrasing or a slightly different numbering system in other states.
Yes.
And for us as a small publisher, that means we can craft a curriculum and then have the technology help us serve that up to customers all over the US, where they will be able to see their own local standards. Same lesson,
yeah,
but I'll see my Ohio standard number, my Washington State standard number, my Florida standard number, whatever it might be. And that helps make our resources more accessible without the full expense of print state editions, which can go out of date hourly, depending on how a state chooses to make revisions.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So if we take that in context of the classroom, Dr. Rubin, can you in selecting tools, that's understanding of alignment to the standards that you're putting out there. Can you tell us how important that is, and what are you looking for when what are the criteria you're looking for when you're bringing stuff into your into the school?
So I think for us, there's a constant balance, and this is speaking of our school. This is not every school, so I want to qualify the statement with that first. That we operate very, very tightly on this equilibrium between content and skills, and if the tool should be speaking to content curriculum frameworks, durable skill curriculum frameworks, and oftentimes both. And so that is really our litmus test, very simply put. And it sounds simple. Like, oh yeah, you find a piece of technology, and I'm sure it, or any curriculum resource for that matter, we want to make sure, ideally, that it is connecting to that student or the community from the outside. If we look, sort of again on that binary, that when they intersect in that Venn diagram in the middle, which is a lot of times how I think, that there's a connection between school and community, skill and content. And some of those curriculum frameworks are explicit. They're very articulately written in a book somewhere on the state website. But we also need to give ourselves enough latitude to make sure they marry into the local context. And that's sort of that variable piece that I think is particularly important to us, because a tool that might work for integrating an English curriculum tool or a speaking and writing tool in Uxbridge, based on how we want to place our students into the surrounding world of work in terms of our internship program, will be very different than what Mark or Sarah or David are seeing in other parts of the country. And that contextual piece is particularly important.
Well, you don't really, I know you don't realize what a great bridge you provided to Mark, because the conversation we had was exactly around that, regionalization of content, because his virtual learning center is actually working with various states. Can you give us a little background there, Mark, and kind of tell us how you're contextualizing things for local regions?
Yeah, so Virtual Learning Academy was started 20 years ago, and it was just used to help support our students that might be homebound. So, with VLA, we want to make sure that that we are student centered first. So when we look at curriculum and courses, we want to make sure it's aligned to those standards. And really, EdGate's helped us a ton, because, like Dr. Morris said, the crosswalks are important, the mapping is important, but we probably already have those lessons, right? And the thing that helped us with EdGate is they might have saw something in our Algebra 2 course that relates better in an algebra course in another state. So that, being us so small, that saved us a ton of time of making that lesson a little bit more engaging for those students. And I think sometimes when I talk to schools and they want to know about our program, our program, we have our own, we create an LMS for that school uniquely. So that student information, the courses, the content, the textbook, everything's in there, and the data. And what's nice about us, we can make live changes in a course that is modern or for that area, like Dr. Michael said. And I think that's so important. And a tool that we've used with AI is, how are we going to make a little bit more better authentic assessments? How can we do things that relate to the kids? So, we have some young employers right now that's creating some unique questions, types of assessment questions on some content that students can relate to. And we want to make sure that we're like forward thinkers and always updating things, because it's a long process, right? We needed to get 28 courses approved in a state within a year. We needed help and support, through that process. And we had some courses already designed, but we had to create some courses with that. So, working with our authors, and our authors are just higher school teachers. We worked with our local university. We was able to submit things to EdGate. Naomi and Greg and their team looked at it. Hey, this crosswalk, here's something missing. Here's some gap analysis missing. So it was just a long approach. In somebody's like, 28 courses. Well, 28 courses for us was a lot at that time, even though we have a huge span of courses. But it's important that schools are comfortable knowing that whatever curriculum you're going to provide, it's going to do that checkbox of it's going to have that curriculum and that standards in it. But like Dr. Rubin said, it's going to really be up to the students and teachers and how they're going to implement those standards, right? In that skill set. I mean, that's really important. And a lot of times I think, okay, we're doing these things just so it's a checkbox. Yeah, we're 100% aligned for our 28 courses. But the implementation is going to be the most important for those students, especially if it's going to be asynchronous, where you have to have engagement activities within your courses. If it's synchronous, you have to have teachers that are able to teach skills and things off of that computer, off those standards that they need as well. So I'm interested to hear more. I know we won't have time about Dr. Rubin and his philosophy. I kind of like that here, that job approach and that internship approach, and using what's in your community, and that's our approach.
One of the things I know, and I'll make mention here, we had interviews with each of the participants, panelists. They're going to be available. The YouTube links will be available in the slides that we provide afterwards. And so you can hear more about Mark's VLA. They serve multiple states, so they've regionalized content. You can hear about Dr. Rubin and some of the EdTech products that he's brought into play, and some of the engineering products on those interviews. And I do want to get back to David and talk a little bit about Emblaze. It's an internship management program. You have over 250 schools, I believe, that are using your product. So to me, there's a great deal of success. Can you give us some of the key statistics and why you believe your team has had such tremendous success accessing this market?
Sure. Well, so yeah, we, in terms of EdTech products, we're pretty boutique at this point. That's actually quite small. But that's by design, because we consider the tool a disruptive innovation, in that we are not necessarily building efficiencies on sort of legacy practice and legacy systems. We're really trying to help innovators do something completely different in the high school space. Which is getting kids out into the real world. As such, we're confident that we have the largest data set of actual student experience out in the real world. So that's really interesting for us in from a research perspective, informing back the policy perspective. Like, we intuitively, by and large, I think, understand that it's important for high school kids to do a lot of things, but one thing is to get connected out into the real world and have some real world experience, have some mentored experiences, and so forth. We think that's intuitive, or intuitively important, but we don't have a lot of data showing us what's effective. We also we have a quite a potpourri of requirements that states have around work-based learning. Some states have none, some states have quite a bit. And so, to Dr. Moore's point, like it's hard to map that, because a lot of many states have requirements, but no systems to put those requirements into practice and to meet those expectations. So we're really excited around like showing researchers, showing policymakers our data, our metadata, and saying, here are some of the examples of high quality real world learning. Here are some examples of not so high quality real world learning. And we have that data now, which is really exciting for us. 2.5 million hours of student attendance logged on our platform out in the real world. So things like that could be really exciting for us in the next phase of our work, which is really trying to inform that practice, so that this disruptive innovation starts to shift into being standard practice.
That's fantastic. And you call it boutique, but I think many ed tech providers would be really thrilled with having that kind of adoption because it's showing the sign of growth and opportunity. So congratulations to employees, and what you're doing is so important. I do want to.
Well, I will say, like, there is now state policy and expectation. It's very hard for a superintendent to say we don't have an internship program at a school district that has a high school. Like we don't have an internship program. That's not something that looks good to them at this point. Like I think it's pretty universally accepted. And so it's just us finding those people and showing them that, yeah, they can actually have not an internship program in name only. They actually can have a program that's thriving. I like Dr. Rubin does.
I think that's really vital. Michael, anything to add to that since you're working together? You're muted, Michael.
Never do that. I think the world would love for me to have a mute button. David, don't say anything. No, I think David hit the nail on the head. I think that the integration piece is really the core of it. And no, I don't know that I have anything to add that he has not already articulately said. And I know you have other questions to get to.
I do want to tell everyone on the panel and out there in our audience today, just reminder, we're going to send out the link to the video afterwards. EdGate is doing work around CTE standards, which is not something, kind of not so popular, but I would encourage people, if you do have interest in career and technical education, to talk to Kathleen at EdGate or one of your sales reps. There's actually a pretty robust initiative going on in that space. A lot of our students are not going to be attending college. They might want to go direct to workforce, so they might gain those skills. And can you tell us what you're using today and why you feel that's important?
Yeah, we use a few different platforms. I mean, I think in progress for us. With respect to our work that's being done outside the building, Emblaze is actually probably our primary facility. Give us feedback on how students are doing, and we're tracking their number of hours. It helps us consider things like punctuality and responsibility and some of these other, I hate the term 21st century skills. It implies that, like the ancient Romans never did collaboration. Come on, let's talk about it for a second. But in existence, things like simple Google Forms that our students can fill out so that they can give us a metacognition about how they feel about that reflective piece. And we are issuing industry recognized credentials through a couple of different platforms, and we've partnered with a few other platforms that skill assessment piece. We've started a couple of other partnerships. One's with a group called Career Scoops, which is a little bit more AI based credentialing, so it stays with the student. So as we document things through we've been issuing credentials and micro credentials through a badging system using a program called Credly. So we've really put the time in of the wanting to document it for the kids in the here and now, but to document it for employers in the future. And that is something that is to wrap their head around, because it is very, very different. That, when a student in 8th grade finishes their civics project, they are getting a documented badge that they have completed something. Yet, not necessarily, but they're not that far off from being able to send to my daughter's in 8th grade. She's putting flyers around the neighborhood and that she's a babysitter. Well, they're able to see a project from September to June all the way through. Well, there's something there.
Yeah, fantastic. We're getting tight on time, so what opportunity to cover anything that you think we've missed, or touch on the topics that we were just talking about, because I do think start with Mark and then we'll go over to Sarah and kind of anything you think we missed here, Mark, that's really important.
First, hey, thanks for doing this. I appreciate you and EdGate. When I think our philosophy at VLA is always student first. I mean, it's always student first, and we want to use technology. Obviously, we're an online curriculum platform, but just to let everybody know, it's important that students are off a computer, doing it through a student's lens that is asynchronous and synchronous. So we want to make sure that that lesson, that it's going to be involved, not just the student, but whoever's in the household as well. So that's our philosophy. It's really important. And obviously it's important that it's standard. We have standard base in each unit and lesson, so the teacher can see that of a unit, but understanding, I guess, like what Dr. Ruben said is the why. You know, why am I doing this lesson? Why is it important, right? And that's important for us. So I just kind of want to let everybody know that you know, we use tech. We understand how much to use and when to use it, and not just totally rely on it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. And I appreciate you being here and joining us today. Sarah.
I want to come back to where I started, and that is this notion that growing up and scaling are not necessarily the same. So as we think about technology, part of what we have to do is help children learn to use technology strategically. I have a 7-year-old granddaughter who's not so sure of spelling and writing yet, but she knows how to use voice control on her iPad
Yeah.
to search for the things she wants.
Yeah.
And it makes me think a lot about the balance between that's efficient search doesn't mean you don't need to continue working on the spelling and writing piece as school goes on. It does probably mean the balance is different. And so that, I think, is a place we've all got to think about as we build these durable skills. In mathematics, we talk about them as the mathematical practices or processes, the kind of reasoning that goes along with mathematics. Where does tech fit? What can technology help you with, whether it's voice recognition or calculators? And how does that make it even more important, say with calculators, to have a good sense of estimation? So that when you see a number come out of the calculator, you can look at it and say, whoa, that doesn't make sense. And now let me stop and think, is that because I keystroked it wrong? Is that because my mental estimation was off? Learning to go through that process so that technology really does what we want it to do is incredibly powerful. And the last thing I'll add, kind of coming back to our pilots conversation and implementation, because I work in the elementary space, we may have teachers who have 4 or 5 different subjects they teach in a day, and each one is on a different platform. Helping people think about, as you work through that piloting and implementation process, how do all these tools work together? Just the tech can become overwhelming, and it doesn't benefit or empower any of us when that happens.
Yeah, and that's where API integrations and making sure synchronicity is really critical. Thank you, Dr. Sarah Moore. We really appreciate you being here as well, and Orgo Education and your contributions. Thanks.
Thanks, Rich.
David, what are you thinking?
Well, I think a lot of what everybody else just said is I want to just put my stamp on that all. In particular, what Mark said, we're really proud of our platform. Like, we have this motto, like, you want to get online to get offline. Like, that's the whole idea of Emblaze, whether it's internships or apprenticeships. Like, sure, get into the system, root around, find a cool experience, and pursue that, and then get out into the real world. Interact with adults who are not your parents or your teachers. See what the world of work looks like. Do authentic, have it learning that is authentic because it's applied into the real world. Those are the things that we focus on. If I worked for a tech company that's sole purpose was to get kids online more, I would not do that job anymore. I think that would not be my job. I came into this work leading wilderness expeditions all over the world. Like, while I was an educator, I was doing that as well. Like, kids need to get out. Like, that's really important, and they need to interact in the real world. So to Mark's point, and then also to Dr. Moore's point, like, there's this bright shiny object proclivity. Like, we were like, oh, the next bright shiny object. Like, there's always going to be that next thing. It has to be aligned, and it has to make life easier and better. Like, if it's cool, it just may not be worth it, and there'll be another cool thing tomorrow, I promise. So I'll leave it at that because I know we're getting short on time. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, David. Pleasure. Michael, anything to wrap this up?
No, I appreciate your time, Rich, and certainly the rest of the group. I think that one of the things that I think you're hearing from all of us is the examination of purpose. And I think that, when we all think of our, David just mentioned he went into outdoor education. I started, I was in public relations and sports media. And, I think that there's a lot to be said about examining purpose and context and understanding the lay of the land and using that, not seeing that as an impediment to any purpose that we have both in the individual and the collective. And that has really resonated with me as I've been hearing some of my colleagues speaking here today.
Thank you. It resonates with me as well. I think that's really an important leave behind for everybody. I'm going to just share my screen with everybody that's still here. The resources will be shared with you. We have the post article mentioned and a few other links. We also will be including in there the panelist interviews. So take a look at those. There's more great information that was shared by each of the panelists. And Sarah's interview is actually coming up and will be posted next week. So keep an eye out for that. And we have links to everybody. So if you need to communicate or find their websites, they're all here on the final screen. So I do want to thank everybody for joining us today, and make sure that, please, come back, see some of these videos, and thank you for your time. Panelists, I know this is not a short process. Everybody spent time to do an initial interview as well as today's session. So we thank you very much for being part of this and providing some insights to the community.
Thank you, Rich.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.